We will be talking to Dr. Aman Bhonsle today, and we will be talking about masculinity and mental health. How masculinity affects mental health, how it could benefit mental health, how certain behavior that are considered conventionally masculine affect the way we think and affect the way we envision the world around us.
Hi,
Hello, Aman. How are you?
I'm all right. Deepak, how are you, buddy?
I am not too terrible. And given that I'm COVID positive, I'm not too terrible. Right. I want to explore with Aman, who will introduce himself as well. He's also a psychologist. That how certain conventionally masculine behaviors and attitudes can actually hurt your mental health, and certain or conventionally masculine behaviors can actually help you form a worldview that assists in building a self-image, which is good. So, over to you. Introduce yourself, and we can begin.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Aman Bhonsle. I'm a practicing psychotherapist, mindset coach, and I also practice something known as transactional analysis. I have my client practice, I run workshops, and I'm attached to the Heart Counselling Centre in Mumbai, which was started by my father in the late 80s, back when people didn't know what counseling was in the city. Uh, I wasn't always a counselor. I used to work in advertising, mostly in Singapore for many years. A lot of my old friends are still, coming on board with the idea that I've had a complete change of profession after doing something completely different for a decade. But I'm very passionate about writing, about coaching. In fact, my third book will be releasing very soon, so I'm doing a little self-promotion. You see, I came
Yes,
prepared.
please.
It's called Sex Traps and Sex Scraps. The Kindle version is already on Amazon. And,
Amazing.
so you guys can DM me if
Would
you
you
want
tell
the
us a
link.
little bit more about the book? Would you
So,
tell us a little bit more about the book?
all right. So basically, it's a Q&A book, basically, with all the questions that I have been answering in the Free Press Journal publication from Sunday to Sunday. So I was getting a lot of positive feedback on the answers that I was giving. People said, how do you manage to give an answer, but also raise 10 counter questions in response to a question? So without spoon feeding someone who wants an
Socratic
answer.
method. There you go.
Right. So how do I give them an answer? So basically, these are questions couples have in context to their sexual relationship, in context to the troubles in their marriage, in context to the troubles in their marriage affecting their sexual relationship, or their sexual relationship being at the center of the various issues they are having with each other as a couple, trust, intimacy, commitment issues, boredom, etc. So this is what the book is, a question answer book. There's a question, there's an answer. There's a question, there's an answer. So it's just a way to sort of get into the mindsets of these various couples who've written to me and the answers I've given to them. So that's a little bit about my book. And this is my first book, Transactional Analysis, is what I've taught. So you can get this on Amazon as well. It's called Essential TA. It's more of a textbook. So this is what I do. I write, I teach, I speak, and I try to have fun.
We're very, very glad to have you then. We're very glad to have you.
Thank you, Deepak.
Welcome, Snigdha. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. So here, I'm going to start off with the first question to you,
Right.
and then depending on what you say, we'll just have a conversation. It's not necessarily question answer. It's not like an interview, but it's a conversation, right? So, how would you describe what according to you is conventional masculinity? It's a two-part question. Masculine behavior, masculinity in and of itself, and what do you think are the pros and cons of that conventional understanding of masculinity?
So I suppose the cliches do apply, right? When someone says masculine, you're imagining Sylvester Stallone with like a holster or with one of those gun belts, a
Right.
Vietnam War
And
veteran, a cowboy,
glistening pecs and whatnot.
the spaceman, the cowboy, the vigil, the Zorro with his mask. So I suppose the conventional masculine trait, conventionally speaking, is one of strength, is one of leadership, is one of foraying into the unknown, is one of taking down the adversary and getting into some kind of adversarial situation, whereby courage, whereby strength, a little bit of brutality is also required. Conan the Barbarian, etc. So these are the cliched masculine traits. The Greek god, with his sprawling chest and broad shoulders and long beard. So conventionally in history, in culture, in philosophy, masculinity or manliness has been equated with strength, and that's where also a lot of the literary inspiration comes from. You'll very rarely see literary novels, back from Charles Dickens' days, where the protagonist was a woman who actually went and hunted for something, as in Captain Ahab and Moby Dick, etc. It was always about the adventures and trials and tribulations of men, because a lot of these books were also written by men, so they were celebrating the male perspective. So masculinity in the
And there's
conventional
nothing,
sense.
I don't particularly find anything inherently wrong with that, but it seems like
Mhm.
the whole narrative sort of runs around two words: strength and power,
Yes,
hierarchy,
yes,
strength and
yes,
power and hierarchy.
and leadership,
So
as well.
yeah, again, it's like, how many people can I lead? How many people are under me? How many people? And that in and of itself is not bad, good, or ugly. It's just the way it's approached. For example, um, to 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 be able to come across as powerful, can I show my emotions and still be considered in control of my life? Whose life do I want to be in control of? Do I want to be in control of only my life or other people's lives?
That's right.
Right. So one of them, as Nick has just very quickly mentioned, the narratives around how do you get and maintain that power. It seems like there are 3 M's to masculinity, which is muscles, mojo, and money. And it seems
Nicely
like
put.
you would want to go do that masculine ideal to muscle, mojo, and money. And I'm not sure what your take on the pros and cons of this kind of masculinity is.
Well, let's discuss the cons. For one, I feel this image has become a cliche and almost a caricature of itself, which is why we're seeing a lot of men in India not able to come to terms with their emotions, because they have been conditioned to believe that crying is a sign of weakness, being vulnerable, being expressive to your partner is a sign of neediness, whereby that might just be a sign of you being very warm and very effervescent about the whole, way in which you see your relationship with your partner. It's got nothing to do with your gender. All right, saying I love you to
Mhm.
your partner has nothing to do with your gender. So a lot of men hold it all
Behaviors are
back
not
in,
gendered, yeah. Hmm.
isn't it? So these ideas that if I'm a man, I got to hold it all in, bottle it all in, constantly be strong. This expression that I think every Indian man has grown up hearing: stop crying like a girl. Stop crying like a girl. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The
Right.
manliest men, Shah Rukh Khan and Amitabh Bachchan, are constantly crying and slobbering in all their movies, and no one says anything
And
to
this
them.
is interesting.
This is
You
strange,
mentioned
isn't
that. Like,
it?
exactly. We're a very
It's all right.
strangely feminine culture to speak of. I think men are not scared of holding hands with each other and being called gay. Like, we don't even have that constant just because you're holding hands, you're gay, right? In the West, like, men wouldn't even touch each other without saying no homo, for example, right?
Mhm.
So we're a very beautifully feminine culture where, as you said, the protagonist is not too scared to cry when a woman leaves her, or the mother dies, or he loses a job, or anything of that sort. So a man is not afraid to cry, but at the same time, this this ideals of masculinity are being lost, and what we're being considered is focusing on strength and power. Like, for example, one thing that I've noticed is, to maintain your strength and power, you deny that there's a problem. You outright deny, no, I'm not crying, you're crying. There's no problem, I've got it under control. I mean, look at what the government's doing today. It's this whole idea of, मेरी छाती इतनी बड़ी है, मेरा डोला इतना बड़ा है, and I'm powerful, and there's nothing wrong with the country. There's nothing. So we deny until we cannot. Like, we deny that there is a problem with our mental health. We deny that I'm hurting. We deny that I'm doing this, and this denial of emotional vulnerability, this
Yep.
denial of having made a mistake. I think that's what is problematic. Would you say that's true?
Yes, definitely. The rigid perceptions of what a man is supposed to feel or what a man is not supposed to feel, or for how long he's supposed to feel it, or how much he's supposed to feel. These rigid perceptions are where the problems are coming from. You see a movie like Kabir Singh, which was discussed ad nauseum before the lockdown, before COVID-19 was the only thing people discussed, was a movie that kind of celebrated this brash macho, ultra angry protagonist, and then him getting away with everything. So a lot of people were very upset and outraged, saying that this is archaic. And whereby I had a very different perspective. I said, well, this is one type of personality type, a slightly overbearing individual with narcissistic proclivity.
Yeah.
So, really, when we talk about masculinity, understand one thing, guys, all men are not the same. So there are certain
Yeah. Thank
traits,
God. Yeah.
there are certain traits that are described as masculine for the sake of convenience. Because as human beings, we like to organize information in clusters. We love labels. We love
Exactly.
labels.
We won't be able to function without them.
Absolutely. It's also, these are
Yeah.
classification tools. These are not guidelines for life. So I believe a woman can have masculine traits and they may be extremely necessary for her in certain situations. For example, if a kid gets beaten up in the playground and his mom goes to get it, go and tell the other kids off, and she shouts at all of them saying, how dare you hit my child? Then that is technically a very masculine trait. Whereby if a child is really sick and his father is sleeping next to him and nursing him to health and pressing his arms because he's having a body ache, that's traditionally the nurturer's, caregiver's role, which is traditionally seen as feminine. But why is it not all right for a man to have feminine traits, for a woman to have masculine traits,
I think
as
this is
and
something
when
important.
as and when the situation demands it?
I think it's something very important. Like, for example, we need classifications, we need categories. When we go into the kitchen, we need to know what is a spice and what is not.
That's
I
right.
cannot go and be right, but I need to know what's the label that says tea. But the thing is, these labels work with inanimate objects far more than they work with animate objects, far more
Yes.
with, and even far less with conscious beings that
Hmm.
have so many variables that these these labels are good to point you in a direction, but they're always inadequate. And sometimes they even point you in a completely different direction, as we've seen in the cases of trans individuals, as we've seen in the case of gendering
Yep.
behavior, as you just said, and gendering clothes, for example. And I think the whole LGBTQ community, that's the whole fight, that if a man wants to put a nail paint just to look pretty and that's what makes him feel good, that doesn't take away from his manliness. That doesn't make him less of a man. And we've been saying that a lot, like there is this whole thing now going on, bring the real men back. I mean, I don't know, where did they go? Where do you want to bring them back from? What
What is a real
era?
man? What is a real
Yeah,
man?
exactly. So bring those like masculine men who are like
With a
like
cigar in his
powerful.
mouth and a machine gun on his arm,
And I'm just like,
the
really,
war
we do not.
veteran.
Precisely because of men like these, that we are in the problems that we're facing today. If we had more emotionally sensitive men, we probably wouldn't have so many. We probably wouldn't have had so many wars and so many troubles. But it's very, very interesting to see that how we are not respecting people's essential dignity, but their abilities to perform gender roles.
Yep. Because Deepak, a lot of times for people to be judged, there's a certain requirement for the criteria to be defined. So if I was to be judged, say as a friend or as a psychotherapist or as a chef, the criteria are completely different for all these three things, right? So a lot of times the criteria for judging an individual becomes their gender, which I don't think is fair, because I think the criteria has to be flexible and has to be suited to a person's individual strengths and abilities rather than their gender and how they are playing a gender-based role that has been set by someone from maybe another culture or another generation. I mean, who decides what a man should be doing? Except him, right? I mean, why are so many other people involved? I always say this to my clients as well. I'm like, why are 10 people involved in you choosing a career for yourself? If you choose a career that where you completely fall flat on your face, it's your failure to own. It's very hard to live with this idea that, oh, I did something because someone else told me to do it, because it was considered the manly career, and now I feel like shit because I am doing something that is so divorced from who I am as a person, that is so completely in the opposite direction of what I'm capable of doing, and it doesn't align with my strengths. It doesn't suit my lifestyle. It doesn't suit my tastes. It doesn't suit my mood. It doesn't suit anything. So many people get into these traditional endless be an engineer, engineering colleges barely even. What if the guy wants to become a pole dancer? What's wrong with that? What's wrong
Yeah.
with that? What if he wants to become a bartender? What's wrong with that? What if he, wants to become a drag queen and dance and make money and move to Vegas? I ask, what's wrong with that? As long as he is doing it and taking the complete responsibility for his chosen path, why do so many people? Because in India, I noticed this problem of getting 10 people involved, the whole family is involved, grandmother is involved. I'm like, unless the person who is involved isn't in the same profession that you wish to be in, I don't understand how their advice can supplement your wisdom. I always say don't seek mentoring within your family, because your family has an emotional stake in your success. And the moment people get emotional about your success, they aren't able to see things objectively, and then they start
Exactly.
forcing you into their criterias,
And
isn't
that's why
it?
we don't counsel, like you and I would not counsel people from our families. It would be not just unethical, it would not be very
No, yeah,
beneficial.
you can't.
Right?
Doesn't work.
Like, for
Doesn't work that
example,
way.
and it's not just a career, like, I think it affects every imaginable area of life, the way you look at yourself as a man and a woman. If your thoughts about yourself, if your self image is very gendered, if you look at yourself always through the prism of gender,
Hmm.
always through the prism of conventionality, I think it affects almost every imaginable area of your life, not just career. For example, I've got a couple of clients, and in these 10 years of counseling, I've got clients who come to me and said, hey, I like being submissive in bed. I like dominating women. I like a
Okay.
dominatrix. And
Hmm.
it affects my sexual relations because somehow I think that I'm going to lose that uh, I'm going to lose that authority in the house if I actually tell her that this is what I like. But I'm not able to enjoy sex because I really would like her to slap me. I would really like her to dominate me. And I was like, you would abandon an
Right.
important part of who you are because you want to hold on to this power that you think you have over her or over the household and it's not just that, like careers, sexuality, just the way we behave with ourselves. I
Also, a
think
very interesting point, Deepak, because see, if a man wants to be dominated in bed, that need not necessarily mean that he's a submissive individual at his office.
in life, yes,
Right, because these are preferences. Like, for example, just because I play violent video games doesn't mean I'm a violent person in real life. I love
right.
violent movies. So these are two very different things. It's a question of taste, really. So, very, very interesting point. See, discussing what you want in bed or what you want from your partner sexually, as a man, as a woman, has nothing to do with your gender. It has everything to do with how ashamed you are or are not about what you feel and what you like and what you really enjoy. And with your partner, typically try to speak from a gender neutral perspective. Don't see yourself as a man or woman. See yourself as one human being relating with another human being. And just make a case, be ardent about it, be articulate about it, and be extremely clear about what you want. And that's what it really is, isn't it? I mean, what is marriage counseling? What we do, we're constantly teaching people how to communicate in a respectful way, in a sensitive way, so as to build trust, so as to, work towards a solution, isn't it? I always say this. I say, are you looking to work towards a solution? Are you looking to mete out the perfect punishment to your partner?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what are you
And
trying to accomplish here? Want things
and
to
I think
build,
a
or you
lot
want
of
things to destabilize?
yeah, even in my experience as a couples therapist, I've seen that a lot of these troubles also arise from, hey, I meant to do this. You're meant to do
Hmm.
this. Who said
Hmm.
it's your
Bullshit.
marriage? Why
Which
why
year are we in?
yeah, why can't you come to a point and say, I think this is how we want to divide our duties. And I think that's what gay couples and lesbian couples do better because
Okay.
they don't come with this gendered expectation of because they're both men, right? Even
Hmm.
there, people are like, but really, who is the woman? Like, who is the one who's getting penetrated? Who's the one penetrated? And she's like,
Oh dear.
They're both men. That's why it's called a gay relationship, because they're both men. And the idea is that straight people have changed relationships first. They wanted marriage of equals. And we're just applying the same. What you're essentially saying is, let's go back to the idea of marriage of the 70s, or those good old days where men knew who they were and women knew who they were, and everybody knew.
I'll tell you something. Firstly, good old days is more a conceptual outlook than most people who talk about the good old days may not remember the good old days objectively. There's a little bit of sharbat added to the mix. It's very romanticized. It's very rosy and pink. It's like how the 1960s is shown. With the white picket fences and the milkmen in the little mini buses and the diners and the soda pop. Archie comics. So these are all colored renditions. Of the past. Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's very interesting what you were saying, that because I think in a city like Mumbai, at least, Deepak, it's so bloody expensive, all right? I just paid an electricity bill of 5,000 rupees and I live alone, okay? Now, and okay, I'm telling you something, all right? It doesn't make sense to bifurcate responsibilities based on gender because of the rising expenses of child rearing, of education, of electricity, of your Netflixes, of your Wi-Fi's, of your mobile bills, of your society bills, of your car bills, of your car maintenance. And when you get all that money together, it's a sizable amount. So whoever brings the largest checks to the table between the two of you, or maybe it's both of y'all have an equal veto in how the house runs and how the relationship runs. So in my opinion, this whole idea, let me explain this, very interesting what the point you made. This whole idea that men are supposed to go out there and figure things out and women are supposed to sit in there comes from caveman culture. Because back then, there were no civilizations. Back then, there was no agricultural economy. Back then, the man went with his spears and improvised weapons to go hunt the kill, and the women got pregnant, and that made them physically vulnerable, and that's why they sat in the cave where the fire was warm, and the man went. So this comes from that era where a woman's being pregnant meant she was vulnerable because there was no law and order, there was no military, there was, no status, there was no marriage, there was no religion. It was all animistic. People worshipped the elements and they worshipped the great beasts. We're talking about that era. So back then, it made sense for the woman to stay indoors more for her physical safety, because otherwise she'd get mauled by a pack of wolves, isn't it? That's why they lived in caves, because we couldn't physically match our friends in the jungle, the predators. So that's why this mindset that, the man goes out and takes care of things and you stay in and take care of what's happening at home, it comes from there. But now in modern...
On that front, there is research, and I would like you to continue your thought, but I thought that I should mention that even on that front, the research says that women would stay home only when they were pregnant.
Yes.
Only.
Yes.
And they were hunting and gathering with men side by side. So, and it's also like, if you actually look at more authoritarian and more patriarchal cultures, just the bone structure of the women in that culture is much smaller than that of men. Because from childhood, they don't go out and play as much as men do. From childhood, in smaller cities at least, and in villages, boys are fed first. And that's true in India. I live in Rajasthan and I see this even in smaller cities.
Yeah, you're right.
Boys are fed first.
You're right.
And I know for us, as English-speaking elite of the country, we're like, "Arey, ye kahan hota hai? Ye to bahut pehle."
Hota hai, hota hai. It's very common. Even in big cities, Deepak, I'm so glad you brought this up. I've heard so many of my female clients say, that when they were growing up, the mothers would say, "Tum baad mein khao, pehle bhaiya ko khane do." You serve him food, etc. Right? So it's very, it's very unfortunate that this is how a lot of, like I remember, even in certain factions of my extended family, when all the men would sit together and eat, women are serving them bhaji. And then the men are done, then the women will eat. I never really understood that as a concept. It was never the case in my house where I grew up with mom and dad. It was just three of us. We always ate together. We always did the dishes together. We always laid the table together. And my mother brought me up to always, be a contributor. She said, always be a contributor to the house. If you want to enjoy what's the house is giving you, you got to also provide to the house for the house. So I do understand where you're coming from, that this whole mindset of, oh, the woman needs to eat later or eat lesser, let the men eat, is very archaic and is very unwelcome, I think, in big cities, because I think everyone's got an appetite for food and for exploration. So, I mean, it's got nothing to do with your, like, I have seen households where the sister is extremely enterprising and aggressive professionally, and she's a go-getter, and the brother would rather sit at home and help the mother in the kitchen. Now, some people who may judge such a setup may say, "Oh, look, he's not a manly man because he prefers to sit at
औरत की कमाई खा रहा है.
औरत की कमाई खा रहा है, whatever." But let's understand that maybe he has a natural tendency to enjoy kitchen work, and what's wrong with that? I ask. And maybe the sister wants to go and become the next
And
CEO of a
it's
company.
so
What's wrong
important
with
what he
that?
just said. Even by law, we are allowed to do what we want to do. There are certain societies where by law, women are not allowed to do few things. At least we're living in India, where by law, we're allowed to do what we want to do, theoretically, at least on paper, right? But the way society sort of wants you to conform to gender normativity, where society wants you to conform to gender roles and expectations, is through teasing, is through exclusion.
Yeah.
Is through making fun of you, is through actually disadvantaging you in so many areas of life. For example, if a woman is doing exceptionally well in conventionally masculine roles, people would say, "Ye meri beti nahi hai, mera beta hai," and that would mean a real.
Oh, I've heard it. Oh man, Deepak, if I had a penny for every time I've heard that being said, and it's such an offensive thing to say to a girl, right?
The opposite, "Ye mera beta nahi, ye meri beti hai," would only be said to mock someone.
True.
So this idea that you are automatically, because you are centered around power and strength, you're automatically better than a woman. We are different. I also don't believe in those people who say, there is no gender difference and there's no this. I mean, there are some gender differences, for sure. For sure. I mean, but those gender differences do not have to result into inequalities that are social, economical, ethical, and personal. So does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. My mother used to say this to me. She said, Aman, we need to start seeing them as complementary sexes, not as opposite sexes, because they require each other to survive. They require there's a certain symbiosis required, and every gender must play to their strengths. Now, they say women are not as strong as men. I assure you, being pregnant and childbirth is an act of strength. It's purely an act of strength. It can be measured in there's no other indice to measure it with, all right? It is purely strength based to carry another organism, let it grow and get it out of your body. It is purely strength based. So where do you come from when you say that, oh, a woman is not as strong as a man? It's ridiculous, archaic, it's offensive. All right.
Got a comment that says, women like me are constantly asked to sound less opinionated and accommodate others.
Well, I'd agree that this is still expected of a lot of women. Like I remember I once dated this girl many years ago, and I remember she told me her father said something to her once because she used to laugh very loudly. She used to giggle. She had this very high-pitched giggle. Her father used to tell her, I'm going to say this in Hindi, कितने जोर से मत हंस, तेरे से शादी कौन करेगा? ससुराल में जाके हंसती रहेगी क्या? ससुराल में जाके हंसेगी क्या? Horrible. I was like, what's wrong? I mean, of course, that relationship ended eons ago. But I always said, what's your father's problem with you laughing? I said, what's your father's problem with you being happy and laughing and being a free-spirited woman? Like, what's his gripe? Shouldn't he be happy? Huh, Deepak, shouldn't he be happy that his daughter is happy? हाँ, तू चालू है कि तू उधर ससुराल में नहीं ऐसे हंस पाएगी and all this. What the hell,
And every time you every single time you challenge gender roles with people who are older than you, they're like, "Tum samajhte nahi ho. Tum samajhte." And I was like, I can say exactly the same thing. Aap samajhte nahi ho. Like, can the same thing be said about you?
See, there is no special talent required to grow old. Old is not equal to wise. You did not, you haven't contributed to growing older. You haven't expedited the process, or you haven't milked it. Or you can, have you ever heard someone say, "Arey, he grows old so well"? Because even a dog or squirrel grows old, yeah. I mean, so just because you've grown older, lost your hair, and have a white beard doesn't make you Gandalf the Grey or Dumbledore.
Yeah. I don't know if this was a Turkish proverb, or was it an Arabic proverb? I read it somewhere. It said, if long white beards are the only things that had wisdom in them, then all goats would be prophets.
How
So,
true is that? Instead, goats are biryani. Are they not?
no, but I really also want to spend 2 or 3 minutes on talking about the sort of beneficial sides of traditional masculinity, for example, which is,
Yeah.
you consider that there is a sense of responsibility that I provide. There's a sense of responsibility that I care. These are the things that, this is not my opinion. I think no behavior should be gendered.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have that opinion. But people who are trying to save masculinity, like the city that I live in, Toronto, there's a professor, there's a so-called psychologist. I mean, yes, he's got a tenure and he's much more educated than I am. But his name is Jordan Peterson. He's written a book about how to save masculinity.
Really? I've heard of Jordan Peterson. Some interesting videos I've seen of Jordan. Yeah, it's all right.
I mean,
He's okay.
he talks, a lot of the things that he talks about are very sensible, but when it comes to gender, he's just lost the plot. He doesn't recognize that gender non-binary people exist, that people who do not necessarily identify with either of the binary of the sexes, who do not identify with the binary of genders and such.
Right.
So it is very, very interesting to see that when intelligent, he's genuinely intelligent, I do believe that. I think he's misguided in some topics, grossly misguided in some topics. He thinks gay men shouldn't get married. He thinks trans women should not, the trans women are not women. He thinks that people who use they and them pronouns are against freedom of speech, blah, 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 blah. Like, when it comes to gender and sexuality, he's lost the plot completely. So, and then he writes about these traditional masculine characters of God made, and he's deeply Catholic as well. His ideas of gender are very, very religious as well. I don't think that he understands that they're not religious. So he comes with this idea, like, what happened to those ideals of providing, of confidence, of taking care of others? It's like, women can do exactly the same thing. Why does it have to be gendered?
Absolutely. Everyone can tap into those qualities, Deepak. It's got nothing to do with a human being's gender. It's got everything to do with a human being's choices and a human being's natural inclinations towards, providing nurturance or leadership or guidance or support. It's got nothing to do with your gender. I assure you, my father has mothered me and my mother has fathered me. Contextually, wherever it was required, they came in with and brought that energy and brought that logic and that that authority to the process of bringing me up, which is why I represent, I'd say, a growing faction of Indian men who believe, that we should stop debating about the length of women's dresses and skirts, let them be alone, and we should rather worry about taking care of our own careers and our own health. Focus on yourself instead of trying to change other people's lives. And I don't know what gender that quality belongs to, but I think that I subscribe to, scientific
Humanity,
inquiry.
if that's a gender.
Yeah, why not, right? Scientific inquiry, logic, rationality. And I don't know if that is gender specific, but I subscribe to that. All right. I'm like, I'm like, just everyone just share what you can and be who you need to be. And don't be answerable or accountable to just everyone. Just because someone is older than you doesn't mean that you report to them or are answerable to them or that you have to subscribe to their
Don't
values.
fall back on authority. Don't fall back, fall back on logic, fall back on reason, rationality, not necessarily authority. And I think part of the reason why a lot of the older generation do not like being questioned is because when you question things that they've based their lives on, that they've lived their lives on for so long,
very true.
then essentially destabilizing their identities. You're destabilizing the very thing that it's like going to a religious person and saying, I don't think your gods are real.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. For some people, like the society is highly gendered, and especially religions are highly gendered. When you go even to the more liberal ones, like Sikhism, when you go to the Gurudwaras, even though no one's telling you, but the roles are gendered. Left is for women, right is for men, or right is for women and left is for men. It's some of this makes sense that you want to protect women from, you want to protect women's bodies from these men who are predatory. Like, I believe that, when, like, I don't know, I'm kind of split on this subject when it comes to trans issues, but gendered bathrooms, for example. A lot of women, like if you were to just look at the rape and assault statistics, 97% of them have been committed on women by men, or by at least people who were assigned men at birth, right? So a lot of women don't feel okay changing clothes in front of people who are male-bodied or male-presenting, right? So I understand that we can't just do away with gender completely.
Of course not. Yeah, you can't do away with it.
But at the same time, it's discrimination and is what I am a bit worried about.
I think discrimination exists on all fronts, Deepak. I mean, gender is what we're discussing today. Discrimination even occurs on the basis. I mean, in India, take your pick, discrimination, even in a place like Mumbai, takes place. A place like Mumbai, there is discrimination based on which part of Mumbai you live in. So people who live in South Bombay are called townies. So they're considered to be affluent. People in the north of Bombay, I say, oh, they're in the suburbs or in the burbs. Even social circles, yeah, even social circles are curated to represent pin code based alliances, proximity based conveniences rather than a meeting of minds and hearts. So discrimination is not going to leave as long as we are alive as human beings. So the question is, what do you discriminate other people? What are your discrimination criteria? Ask yourself that question.
One of my dearest friends have asked a question to both of us, and you can go first, and then I can have a look at it later. His name's Jerry. He asks, why not? Why can't we do away with gender completely?
Oh, well, I mean, just because we want something to happen isn't necessarily, going to translate into it actually happening. I keep telling people, I keep telling this to people, stop over-indexing your importance on this planet. You're just one person, all right? Look up at the stars someday. You're just one person. So if you want to go subscribe to this logic that I want something gone, I want something abolished, and therefore it should be abolished, you're going to invite a lot of misery. Instead, alter your expectations. This is an imperfect world. It's been biased, it's been unfair, it's been opportunistic, it's been greedy, it's been corrupt way before even your great grandfather was born. So what makes you think it's going to change just because you tweeted about it?
Right. And I personally would want to live in a gender neutral society. I would want
that would be ideal. It would be ideal. Of course, that would be ideal. Yes.
That a lot of people have organize their lives around it. It's the same reason that I would like to see all religions abolished, all organized religions abolished, but it won't happen.
It won't, because it's a crutch. It's a crutch for a lot of people. Yeah.
To understand themselves and to understand who they are, and that's what we are looking at it. Just because something may not happen in our lifetimes, perhaps, why can't we want a world without gender?
Of course you can want it. Of course you can want it. You can want whatever the hell you want. I want a private jet. Doesn't mean I'm going to get one. I got to accept the fact that I can still travel without a private jet, or I can still be comfortable. So I mean, there is the idealist's point of view and there is the realist's point of view. I'm a realist. All right. Read our history. I was telling this to a client of mine. The history of humanity is essentially a history of invasions and wars, if you actually think about it. Now, why do you think that is? Isn't it because of the need for more, the need for this belongs to me or this is important for me and therefore I must have it. I think all human beings, I think we as a species suffer with vanity also to a great degree. Just because I want it, that means it needs to happen. Says
And
who?
I would
Says
definitely
who?
want to see a world in which gender does not matter. It's not even a thing that we talk about, leave alone used to organize our societies. But I see other people's right to want to do that. But
Well,
their right to want to do that stops when
of
it
course.
interferes with my right to live my life gender free.
Absolutely. And this is an interesting point. See, Deepak, what can you and me control? We can control ourselves. We can control maybe our little household, maybe the kinds of people who enter our lives. So if everyone does that, then maybe in the long run, certain gender equality and a world without these discriminatory labels will come into existence. But change begins at home. It's a very old saying.
And it's a very, very interesting thing that Jerry's raised again. It's like we know how the world with binary genders have panned out. But what are the dangers of the world without gender, in your opinion? I don't particularly see a danger in having a genderless world, or not. I really think I'm hard pressed to even think of a particular. If you, Jerry, know, if you're listening in still, and if you think that there are any dangers, please highlight them. But I do not particularly think that there are any particular dangers that would come around if we stop stressing on the gender of the person and telling them that you need to do this because of what's between your legs and because I think if we stop associating particular behaviors with what's between your legs and misconstruing gender with sex, I I do not see that there is any problem with that. I only see benefits, but there's nothing which is without both. So I'm not sure. What do you think could be the dangers of living in a world without gender?
Well, I think more than gender, there are a few things that I find dangerous, and that I find naivety very dangerous. I find gullibility very dangerous. I find a self-congratulatory attitude and vanity extremely dangerous. You know why? Because that is directly going to clamp down on your plans for yourself. Because what happens is that's like wearing red color glasses. Everything that you see will be red. You won't be able to see things for what they are. If you're gullible, if you're naive, if you're vain, if you're self-congratulatory, if you're arrogant. And I believe these traits can be possessed by any individual, not just a man, not just a woman. So the way I see it, the world you create for yourself is the world that will eventually transform or stay the same. So regardless of your gender, you you follow your heart, you practice a profession that you enjoy. Stop worrying so much about what the elders and the spouses and the governments and the organized religions and the clerics are telling you, because that represents just one agenda and one perspective. What makes them right and what makes you wrong? It's so subjective, isn't it? I even don't like using the words right and wrong or good and bad, because who gets to decide these things really, isn't it? What's right for you is right for you. Why do you have to go about making an advertisement of it? If you want to do it, do it. Do it quietly, do it
And
happily.
I think gender also becomes a very important topic when we're talking about transgender, as people who
Okay.
transition from one sex to another sex in their
Like the Wachowskis, right? In Hollywood, that's the immediate example.
yeah.
Now, let's take the Wachowskis as an example, since you brought this up. Is their prowess as a filmmaker or is their relationship as siblings affected by their gender? I don't think so. But should they wish to change, and they did change their genders, does that bring them closer to what they believe is their identity? If the answer is yes, then why, nothing wrong with that. I think nothing. Uh,
Yeah, I think if people do want to transition and they want to situate themselves in one particular camp or the other, or largely in one camp or the other, where
mm,
I do not want every woman to be considered important only when she abandons femininity, only when she
mhm,
abandons makeup will she be taken seriously. Or
mhm.
a man has to now go overtly feminine to be considered important. And yes, so if they want to sort of situate themselves into largely a gender camp or the other, they can do that. But if we live in a genderless society, or a society that doesn't put too much pressure on gender, we might not have that amount of angst that trans people go through right before transition. Some of them might not even feel the need to transition. I'm not sure about that. I've spoken, and this is all anecdotal, I've spoken to some friends of mine who've transitioned, and I've asked them, do you think if society accepted you as an ultra feminine man that you were, would you have transitioned? Some of them said no, and some of them said yes. I would have still transitioned. But then it's just like, I want to change my body the way some people want to change their nose. It's far more fundamental than that. I understand changing your genitals, it's far more fundamental than that for trans men to get their breasts removed and such. So if they do want to do that, I think it would still decrease the amount of trouble that they go through right before transition.
Well, I'm of the school. I do believe that social approval itself is, it makes you needy, and that neediness can impair your vision for yourself. I'll give you my own example, Deepak. I couldn't kick a ball straight while growing up. I didn't grow tall for a very long time. My voice didn't break for a very long time. I used to be called madam on the phone till I was 15 years old. Most people don't even, no one believes this when they hear my voice now, that I was called madam till I was 15. And because I couldn't play sports, I wasn't a jock, and I was interested in poetry, books, music, art, which were back in the 90s considered very feminine pursuits. And because I also joined an arts college, I remember feeling low self-esteem for the longest time for not being manly enough. But when I realized that the people I'm trying to impress actually don't even care as much about me as I think they do, I realized the only person I actually need to impress is my own damn self. And the moment that switch happened, I was able to align with my strengths. I was able to do things I enjoyed. I was able to find the right kind of people who bolstered me. So really, I mean, your gender is strictly your business. Your desire to transition is strictly your business. How you view masculinity, femininity, your role as a man and a woman, is strictly your business. So don't submit to scrutiny, and don't submit
That's a very good point, that even after you transition,
right,
you still don't, like, even if I transition from today being a cis man to, say, a woman, right?
Okay.
If I transition into a female body, I still do not have to be governed by what women should do. Now,
Yes,
should I then
absolutely.
give up
It is your
all
body.
my-
It is your body. So
Yeah,
it's for you to enjoy and celebrate, isn't it?
It's the strictness around what is expected of you. It's the strictness around what you can do and expected of you.
By
That, I
whom?
think, I have deep-rooted by society is what
By
I have
society.
a problem with. Yeah.
Of course. But society is ultimately just a bunch of people, isn't it, Deepak? And people
Yeah.
can be wrong. If history's taught us one thing, is that people can be pretty wrong in
You can
how
do that.
they. Yeah, I mean, a guy like
And it's
Jesus
deeply
was
affects.
persecuted. I mean, from what we hear, he was a pretty nice guy and walked around telling people, stop being greedy, love each other, be kind to your neighbors. They're like, this is too revolutionary. Let's go hang the guy. I mean, whatever it is, Buddha was driven out of India because he was, clamping down on ritualisms and, all the rituals that Hindu culture is known for carrying out. And they said, get him out of here. He's spoiling the market. So, I mean, the price of greatness, the price of self-determination is to be rejected by the larger uh, corpus or the larger group. And I think that ultimately shouldn't matter to you if you really want to be happy and content with your life. What other people are saying, what society is saying. Now, there's the debate. Society should stop saying it. They're not going to stop. They are not going to stop just because you want them to stop. All right. End poverty. End gender discrimination. These are lovely things to say. So sweet of you to say it. But is it going to happen? Okay. What are we going to base our expectations based out of? Based out of history. And if history's taught us one thing, it's that people don't change unless they're sufficiently greedy or sufficiently afraid. Very rarely do people change. Very rarely do human beings change. I'm sorry if this is
Yeah.
bursting bubbles,
No,
but
you're right.
only you can change. You can't get the world to change. So if you want to change, bloody hell, go ahead and do it. No one's stopping you. But the moment you become a prisoner,
when we're going and doing these diversity and inclusion programs and telling companies how they need to make their employees, especially their LGBT employees, their women
yes,
employees,
yes,
good, included in such, we have to also make a case on this is going to help with your profits. You know, there is
absolutely, yeah,
research
yeah,
to say
absolutely. A,
that.
ha
There's
a
research to say
happy.
that people.
No, go ahead. Sorry,
Mhm.
sorry, sorry. Go
No, no,
ahead.
no.
No, you're making
There's
a very good
research to
point. Go
say
ahead.
there's research to say that it will increase your profits, it'll increase this, that, and the other. But do I have to make you greedy to make you want to do the right thing, make you want to do the inclusive thing, and such? So I think what we need to sort of rail against are behaviors and not gender behaviors. So behaviors are one that are toxic. The behaviors that it could be
Yeah,
in women. It could be toxic femininity. It could be toxic masculinity. For example, the example that's just come in is Kangna Ranaut. She's like she'll just say things that people would be like, okay, you're literally the reason why you got banned from Twitter is you're telling the leader of a country to incite violence. And
Virat
that's why you
Roop,
got
right? The whole Virat
Virat
Roop
Roop and
comment.
that. Yeah, and if this was said by a man, we'd be like, oh, ये तो आदमी है, आदमी तो लड़ते रहते हैं, कहते रहते हैं. But if a woman says it, we're like, she is Karni. She's like, she's like Lakshmi Bai, and like, it's different.
I mean, I don't think a mood disorder or a personality disorder has a gender. And Kangna may very well be having both or either of these if she's
Good
put under
one, good
scrutiny.
one.
हमको
Yeah.
थोड़ी मालूम यार उसके दिमाग में क्या चल रहा है कैसे बड़ी हुई वो हमको थोड़ी मालूम है it's a question of
Oh,
like everyone says Kangna should have done this Kangna should say this but have you even sat and had a cup of tea with her you don't even know her why do we assume to know people based on what they show us because there is so much more that is happening beneath the surface there's so much that they don't want to show you so for me I mean as a psychotherapist the mandate and I have to resist this temptation to force my perspectives or to force my judgment or to force my morality or to force my worldview on another individual. Unless I know them sufficiently, I do not have the right to force what Aman Bhonsle thinks about them on them. So I
right.
usually say, karne do, hone do, because who the hell are we? Why am I don't even like very often
I
I
mean,
tell
that's
my
a very good.
students as well. I tell my students
That's a
this. I'm like, I didn't require a special talent to be born before you. The fact that I know more than you is because I have studied the subject and because I like the subject and because I've lived a little longer. No one's preventing you from asking me questions and no one's preventing me from saying, I don't know the answer. Let's both go and find out. Isn't it? So I think
Yeah, and I
that
think that's an amazing thought to sort of end our session with. जो जैसा चाह रहा है उसे वैसा करने दो
कर लो
जेंडर
यार.
से उसे रोको मत मेंटल हेल्थ वहीं पर है जब आप खुद को एज एन इंडिविजुअल पहले देखो आदमी और औरत बाद में देखो and that's how you sort of adjust your expectations from yourself and don't pay attention to what others are saying. And I think if you traditionally want to come across as something and somebody and you want to impress others, you are putting your mental health online. And mostly people who are trying to impress others and not coming out on the other side mentally strong, or mentally stronger than they went in. So I think that's a very good idea to sort of end our talk with. But I would really like to take this opportunity and thank you, Dr. Aman. It was amazing talking to you. It was
my
amazing
pleasure.
talking to you. I loved so many of your ideas. You were just like, hey, it doesn't require special talent to grow old. I'm going to use that. I will send it back to you. That was interesting.
True, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. So
आप
thank
अगर
you so
आप
much.
अगर आप अगर बुढ़े हो इसका ये नहीं मतलब हुआ कि आप बुद्धिमान हो या बुद्धा
बुद्धा
हो
और बुद्धिमान होना अलग अलग बात है और अगर दाढ़ी में ही विजडम होती तो आज हमारा देश बहुत अच्छा चल रहा होता
अरे बाप रे अरे बाप रे ये क्या कह दिया आपने
चलिए thank you so much Aman. Bye bye.
Let's do this again, Deepak. I really enjoyed myself as well.
Yes, this is not going to be the last time. Bye bye.
All right, bye bye now.